Hello everybody, my name is Troubl, and in the background is a matchup between four relatively unknown players, and of these four, one of them, Mr. Boehm0101, this would be his first team match that he's ever done. He's brand new to the game, so I give him some street cred by featuring him here on the channel. And since this is in the backdrop, I thought this would be a good time to do a war game talk, with the topic being, will the ultimate patch ruin the game? So let's go back in time. Let's jump in the old time machine, the old DeLorean, 1982 DeLorean, jump back in time and revisit the past. Why are we at the ultimate patch? It all begins with a publicity stunt by Focus Home Interactive in an attempt to promote their Wargame European Escalation game, in hopes that creating fans for this game, they could successfully create some underground, independent, indie type hype for the next game that they'll be launching in 2 to 3 months. Amazon says April, late April, but who's to believe that? The big stunt was a fairly massive tournament. They made no limitations on how many people could join. I think originally it was set to be 300 people, but then it ballooned into 1,400 people. They put tons of prizes. I think it ended up being in the hundreds of thousands of dollars in prizes because of how many, well, not hundreds of thousands. Maybe it was only tens of thousands, but it was a big amount of prize money and free stuff that went out, and it got a lot of attention. It also kind of rejuvenated the game. After the Wargame Cup, there were definitely way more people in the lobbies looking for games. It became very easy to find ranked matches and non-ranked matches alike. A lot of the game modes that basically just never got used, suddenly people started playing them. And so they really did a good job of revitalizing the Wargame European Escalation multiplayer scene. However, it caused a little bit of a problem. During the tournament, basically Crow2 and Sotek met each other, and they're both two of the top players in the game. And so Sotek got eliminated in like the second round. That was a pretty big deal. And that didn't get that much attention. Just roughly ignore it. And then probably around round 4, round 5, Tiga, who's the #1 player in the world, almost got eliminated by a guy who's relatively unknown, who's basically vanished from the scene since he did this, Lord Gamer, who did a helicopter all-in, and he really changed how people were doing helicopter all-ins and using helicopters in general. And he did it so effectively that basically after that moment, everyone was doing these wacky helicopter all-ins with spread out helicopters. And because Tiga was almost eliminated, like, that became a very good strategy for getting rid of them. As well, Fev55 got pretty well to the end of the tournament doing these infantry rushes. Now they're a little more delicate than things that you'd see on the ladder or in ranked, but they were all the same, still just infantry rushes with some kind of support, usually tanks or heavy tanks or helicopters, something like that. Sometimes artillery. So this pointed out a lot of the pretty prominent inequalities in the game. And it made people ask the question, hey, eugen systems, is this the game you wanted? Now the tournament had a huge impact on the game. No doubt. It started pointing out all these imbalances that people didn't think were really there. There was a lot of denial whether on how balanced the game was. In fact, everyone would say like, oh, I can beat every single rush, and then that same person would just get completely wrecked by a rush. Like, it was pretty bad. And basically in the 3rd week of January, a lot of the people who've been playing the game for a long time were selected to be a thing called marshals. And marshals were basically given the power to make balancing changes to the game. So they play a patched version of the game. and they talk about what they think could improve it, and so then they get those improvements in, and they test it again, so on and so forth, until the game is balanced. This process started somewhere January 15th, 16th, somewhere around there. It's now March what? Today is March the 9th. Jesus, tomorrow's my birthday. No, it's March 8th. Cool, 2 days before my birthday. Good. Yeah, March the 8th. It's been about 2 months since this patching began. And what started off as a small project to try and simply balance the game kind of ballooned into something else. Now, not only are they balancing the game, but they're also trying to make every single unit in the game useful and part of a tangible strategy, which to me seems like the scope of this patch might be too much. And so with that in mind, the topic that I like to talk about is, will the ultimate patch ruin the game? And that seems like a kind of a mean thing to say, specifically because the ultimate patch was in the end designed to fix the game. But the more and more I see these patch notes, and keep in mind, patch notes for this patch is ridiculous. It's up to over 500 lines of patches. But there's a lot of wonky stuff about this patch. One, this is the big one. They removed the frontal armor off of pretty much every armored personnel carrier in the game. In fact, all of them. There's no armor on APCs anymore. And the reason why that's a pretty big deal is because an APC drop has been a part of the game strategy since day one. Everybody in the game was doing these APC drops. Never in the way they do it now with, 40 VABs rushing in with 2 Martyr VTS1s. Never like that. But dropping a few infantry on top of tanks while using other tanks as your spotters, as your soakers, I should say, was always a very viable and powerful tactic. And it was always considered to be skillful and good. And then basically people started doing these VAB rushes, and that just changed. And the proposed solution was to remove armor. The problem is it means that the armored infantry units that were being used in pushes are now gone. And my worry is that this would make pushes, and I should specify pushes versus rushes, whereas a rush is an all-in. It's an attempt to just win the game one go. Usually these people only build one command vehicle. Versus a push, in which you're trying to gain a territory, and usually you want to solidify a territory with infantry. If the vehicles have no armor on them and they just kind of die, that becomes somewhat of a problem. Because one of the good things about infantry was you can drop them on top of tanks and the infantry would survive. And then on top of that, the VABs, the armored personnel carriers of choice, would help deal with infantry. And now it's going to be a lot harder to get those infantry to the front lines. In fact, it might even be impossible. Poorly microed infantry struggle to get to the front line. These would have to be insanely well microed infantry, and unfortunately there's only like 2 players in the game with that sort of micro. That's V55, Komarami. That's it. That's the entire game's worth of people with that amount of micro to be able to work on multiple flanks and whatnot. So realistically, the way the game they wanted to play it will not be possible, especially for infantry. So infantry will be relegated to jungling, to basically luck. Will this guy come to this area and will I successfully kill him? That's luck. Complete and utter luck. Now, of course, you might be aware of my opinions on artillery. I don't like artillery because, once again, artillery is winning by luck. Hopefully you kill enough stuff with your ammunition. Second big change is buffs to helicopters. They're going to be doing more damage. And they shouldn't survive so much. To counter this, every single AA in the game has been given insanely high range. Even the Flakpanzers, the Flakpanzer Jeepards, are going to have insanely high range buffs to the point where it doesn't even matter. Like, they could one shot and it wouldn't matter how much damage they did at all. Once again, this is kind of a weird little thing, and I'm wondering whether these vehicles can be abused in non-anti-air functions, and that's something I worry about as well. Maybe a flak panzer, which is very good against infantry. And by the reason why flak panzers in the first place had such a limited range wasn't for realism at all. No, that's not the case. Its limited range was because flak panzers were also very good with dealing with infantry. They had that fast autocannon type damage, and they could kite infantry away. But I digress. That means that helicopter play is going to be largely out. Even having recon helicopters might be kind of risky. They made a lot of vehicles pretty cheap, and I suspect that when the patch goes live, a lot of BMP2s and BMP3s, which are your sort of hybrid rocket anti-infantry type weaponry stuff, I suspect they'll become a lot more popular. And I smell new types of rushes. So instead of having infantry carried around in, you know, normal old Scott 1, they might go into Scott A-B or something along the lines like that. I'm worried that these changes are designed specifically to turn the game into a tank fest. Now, I have no problem with tank warfare at all. As a matter of fact, if you've played with me, you know that I am very, very heavy on tanks. I like the T-55 AMs, I like those big old T-80Us, I like the T-72, and I also like my my shallows, my BTR shallows. I love tanks. I love playing tanks. But I would be worried that my tanks are becoming too powerful and that all the anti-tank options are becoming too weak. Because that means I can just roll in with tanks and win. So they're making fairly significant nerfs to anti-tank weaponry. Some of them are going to have lower potency. Some of them are going to have slower reload times. Some of them are going to have... what else do they have? Higher costs, so you can deploy less of them. And these are all very significant nerfs to anti-tank teams. And so by doing that, I can just, you know, load up only T-55 AM and just steamroll through and kill. And there wouldn't be much you can do about it because they can't rush infantry up to my tanks and kill them because, of course, the infantry carriers have no armor. And I worry very much whether this will completely ruin the game. And I'm sure the marshals who are doing this are also considering this problem, that this patch could in fact ruin the game. And I know they're considering this fact because the patch has taken so long. It's basically, it was promised to be done by the end of the Wargame Cup, and the Wargame Cup ended like 2 or 3 weeks ago officially, and it's still not, you know, it's not been finished. So really, will this be done in a significant time? That's one big thing. And the changes that are done in this cannot be undone. That's a huge part of this. So if the game completely sucks after this patch is done, well, that's all. That's all she wrote. There's no fixes, no nothing. That's all there's going to be, is this patch and it. There are a lot of nice changes I like to it. A lot of them I suggest to myself. So of course I agree with them. But a lot of these changes, I just look at it and I think this could potentially ruin the entire game. Have thoughts on the ultimate patch? There's a comment section. Leave a comment and join the discussion. Do you think the ultimate patch will ruin the game? My name is Troublemaker. Thank you guys for joining me. And next up will be a game. Yeah. Watch it. Watch it now. And also thanks to 0101 for sending me this game. Later, gents.